Hello from Jerusalem. This is Watchmen Talk, a series of conversations with key people in Israel's military, diplomatic, and security fields throughout the year. And our guest is Efraim Halevy, former Mossad Chief, also formerly Israel's ambassador in Brussels to the NATO alliance and to the European Union. A while ago, we had a conversation about Mossad and some of Efraim Halevy's lessons from almost 40 years of serving the country. And we would like now to go on a tour d'horizon of Israel's strategic, regional, and global map as is seen from Jerusalem or also from Tel Aviv, which is closer to where Mossad is headquartered. Hello, Efraim.
Hello.
As we are now speaking at the end of the second decade of this century, Israel is in a better position security-wise than it was? What are the trends if you look ahead?
Well, let's say a word about what has changed. When we became independent, we had a ring of enemies around us. Today, we have two peace agreements which have taken place, which were, by the way, sought for many years by Israel, in which the Mossad played a key role in the contacts that were established, and the methods of the contacts that were established, and the final game of bringing a peace treaty. So the South is secure, the East is secure, the North is not secure. Secondly, we have a whole new set of players in the region who are coming to the fore and who preferred to stay in the background for a very long time. This is the second circle which is surrounding us, which are the Gulf states and other countries in which there are Muslim majorities of one kind or another.
But one should add that during Ben-Gurion's time and a bit later, he saw this outer ring as perhaps an opportunity for Israel to get away from the encirclement by the core confrontation states.
That's true. That is why he went and was very, very anxious to establish a link with Turkey, to establish a link with Iran, and also to establish a link in Africa. But this did not, in my view, did not produce a game changer, which was of the kind of a peace treaty. But now we have other players who are coming to the fore, who have developed themselves over years in a manner which brings them into the international arena as very, very strong players. I'm speaking about the Gulf states. I'm speaking about countries like Saudi Arabia, which are both not only a source of petroleum, but also they are big hitters on the international banking scene, in the economic scene, on the world markets, on the stock exchanges, on football clubs, you name it, and they are there. This is a relatively new phenomenon. Secondly, we have these states which have a very small and modest number of actual citizens in them. And there are some of the states, especially in the Gulf, where the foreign workers and the foreigners there outnumber the citizens more than by 2 to 1. And this is also something new. And thirdly, we have astute people there who have risen, who have been educated, some of them in the West, who know the rules of the game in every way and in every form. And they are now pulling their weight. They are second and third generation to the original rulers in the Middle East, the sons and grandsons of those who have created dynasties, whether they are regal dynasties like in Saudi Arabia or in Jordan, for one for two examples, or in the Gulf.
But what is the strategic landscape that they are seeing? There is no Cold War anymore. At least what the Soviet Union represented to them as a threat is no longer there, even though Russia is perhaps coming back in other forms. Iraq, which was vanquished under Saddam Hussein, is not such a force, but Iran is. And the United States, at least under the Trump administration, wants to go back to America, to fortress America, and perhaps leave these countries to their own devices, supply them with arms, but perhaps pull out troops. How does that all count in their calculations?
I think that the countries in the Middle East that I've mentioned just now are realizing that the situation is much more complex. I don't think that the description that President Trump has decided to leave the Middle East is a true description of what he's been doing. On the Israeli-Palestinian issue, he's produced a plan. He's produced a plan which at least the Israeli side has considered to be a plan which is worthy of discussion and of negotiation concerning the Palestinian issue, which include, by the way, the creation of a Palestinian state. From the Israeli point of view, the fact that the United States has taken such a position is not only that the United States supports Israel, like supporting Jerusalem as the capital of the city, like supporting the ultimate annexation of the Golan Heights and similar matters, but it's also a plan which includes items which on the face of it are not desirable to Israel. The present leadership in Israel is trying to belittle these items which are unpalatable to it. But I think they are making a disservice to themselves, and if I may say so, also a disservice to the population, the people of Israel. The people of Israel understand that, basically speaking, the leadership in Israel has accepted, A, the two-state solution, and B, it's accepted the fact that when it comes to providing arms and so forth in the Middle East, there are other players who could get very advanced weaponry, which Israel might not be too anxious to allow them to receive, and that Israel would not be able ultimately to prevent this from happening. So the picture is much more complex, and I think that when you look at the Gulf and you look at the way they have developed in many ways, and you see each ruler, whether it's the Qataris in the north, who we haven't been talking very much about, well, I'll say something about them.
Please do.
But, and you have the United Arab Emirates, UAE, and you have Saudi Arabia. You have shades of different types. They're not just one typography that is cut and paste when it comes to seeing how the Gulf states are and what they are.
You speak out of personal experience too. You've met some of these guys more than 20 years ago, haven't you?
I first came to the Gulf in 1975. I met the then ruler, who was then a young ruler in Oman, in Salalah, which was a small little townlet on the border between Oman and what was then the People's Republic of South Yemen. I met him at his command post. And from then on, we had a very interesting relationship. I was not the first Israeli to meet him, not the first Mossad person.
You mistook him for a Jew, for a Yemenite Jew?
No, I did not at all. I took him for what he was, a very, very astute and a very, very courageous young leader. And I also understood that we had to talk to the states, not only in terms of military and strategic support and advice, but also to look at the serious problems they have and see whether we could help them on that. And then one of the major problems that Oman then had was a shortage of water. There was a seepage of the water shelf from the Gulf into Oman, which threatened the water wells of Oman. And the solution to that, of course, was desalinization of water. I was able to prevail and to receive the support of my division chief, who was then Nahum Admoni, who later became head of Mossad, and I succeeded him by two. And we were able to send a leading water desalination expert to Oman in the 70s, which changed the future of Oman in terms of water. And this, of course, had a major effect on the stability of the country.
One should perhaps mention that it was in the early 70s, after the British have adopted the policy of east of Suez, going back home, that these so-called trucial states became the Emirates, and Bahrain got its independence, and some of the others, which was, in a way, or enabled you to be present at the creation and help some of these countries stand on their feet.
Yes, yes. And it was us. I was one of those who was involved, not the only person involved. But at one time I was deputy head of the division, then I became head of the division later on. And I think that we were able to capture the spirit of what might happen. We were not able to forecast in greater detail what would happen, but we knew in what direction this was going. Now, I want to emphasize that it's not only the states which are now being discussed in recent months, in which have normalized their relations with Israel. By the way, normalized with them. We do not have new peace treaties with them. We have not traded peace for peace, as my prime minister would say, because peace for peace means to say you got something for nothing. And the Gulf states are great experts in never giving something for nothing. And I think that is the way things should be. But I think that we are seeing various shades of what is going on. We have Qatar in the north, for instance, which is much closer geographically to Iran. Qatar, which has its relations with the Iranians. Qatar, which has its relations with Turkey, which is a stormy petrel of its own in the Middle East. And we have relations with Qatar.
And Qatar has relations with Hamas in Gaza.
Not only relations. Qatar are the, as we speak, those who send them in monthly money bags to distribute to the population. Qatar is securing the existence of the Hamas leadership in Gaza. And there is talk all the time of an Israeli negotiation, indirect, through the Egyptians, through the Qataris, through this, that, the other, to reach a more permanent settlement of the Gaza issue. So we have Qatar in the north, we have UAE on the south, and we also have two major powers together with the United States, not only Moscow, but also China, which are playing an ever greater role in the Middle East. I remind you that China now has a military post in Djibouti. Djibouti is not far from the Middle East. It's right on the southern tip, on the eastern shores of the African continent.
Horn of Africa.
Horn of Africa. I think these are very important developments which we're all looking at.
Efraim Halevy, you have some 65 years of varied experience as a student leader, as a member of a cabinet minister's staff, and then, of course, both in Mossad, the Foreign Service, and the National Security Council, which you headed under Prime Minister Sharon. And now, for the last 17 years, presumably you are invited for briefings from time to time, but you are not piped in to current intelligence on a daily basis. Is that a true reflection of the way?
I think I'm not piped on the end of anything intelligence-wise in any way. I don't. I believe that it serves the interests of both incumbent heads of Mossad, and I remember how it was when I was head of Mossad, to realize that once you leave the Mossad, you are a free citizen, except for guarding the Mossad secrets as far as they can be guarded.
So that's the basis of the next question. There is this motto, commercial motto, an educated consumer is our best customer. An educated citizen in Israel or around the world, following the news, perhaps with some basis, you are educated at university, and you wrote yourself, you edited a periodical dedicated to foreign affairs, but just a regular citizen, when he consumes the news, how much does he miss? When you were in on the know and you had access to all classified material, what was the delta? How much did you know more than the regular citizen? So that when one now watches the news or reads the newspapers, how much does one miss?
I think there's a very big delta. And I don't think that intelligence, which is qualitative intelligence, which is strategic intelligence, has to be shared beyond a certain pale. I do think that it is important there should be a group of people, not one. We had a committee of heads of services, which I chaired. Traditionally, the head of Mossad was chairman of the committee.
Along with military intelligence and Shabak, the internal security service.
Yes. And we discussed many issues at the time. And the chairmanship was always the Mossad. I don't know why. Maybe I do know why, but that's not the important thing at the moment. I think that there has to be a big delta between that and the public. But I think it is a big mistake when you engage in secret operations and intelligence and in secret strategic discussions on a one-on-one basis at the top level without involving those who should be around.
You mean the Prime Minister and the Mossad Chief who works directly for him?
Yes, I think that there has to be a cabinet, there has to be a discussion, there has to be a pro and con, and there is less and less of that. And therefore, for instance, you get up one morning and you find that there are two new agreements with two countries. And one man did it, as he said. It took him 26 days to create two peace treaties, which are not peace treaties. But according to the unwritten constitution we have, these matters have to be discussed not only in the cabinet, they have to be discussed in parliament. When the treaty was concluded with Egypt, it was brought to the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, for discussion and for a vote. When the Jordanian peace treaty was finally agreed, it was brought to the Knesset for a vote.
The point being accountability or wisdom?
A mixture of both, I think. And I think it creates a situation in which if one person has all the knowledge and all the power, and he's also delegates to himself the authority to make the final decision and to sign the agreement and to ignore the machinery of democracy here, and I'm not saying that the actual decision was a wrong one. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about the methodology. Means to say that in the end, this is not an agreement between the state of Israel and the state of Israel were not involved. One person was involved, the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister in Israel, according to the system, is what you call in Latin primus inter pares. He's the first among their equals. And this has been lost on the way. And this is very important and very, not annoying, but it's very troublesome because the Constitution here is a parliamentary democracy, and it is different from even from the democracy in the United States. The United States has a constitution. We don't even have a written constitution. So you can't say, according to the constitution, you do this. It is a constitution which became a practical constitution. But in the end, if you want public support, if you want not full transparency, you have to have the machinery of the democracy on board.
But how do you describe the right relationship between the political echelon headed by the Prime Minister and the professional level, in this case, the Mossad Chief? What is the point in which the chief has to resign on conscience rather than execute a directive which he thinks may not be legitimate?
I will tell you a story. We had a very, very delicate operation we were going to carry out. It involved a lot of people. It involved a lot of people going into foreign territory, very deep into foreign territory, and involved dangers which are dangers of something going wrong. And in this field, what is more important than anything is how, if at all, you have a rescue plan in place. Not always can you have a rescue plan. Some of the things that we have done had no rescue plan.
So in the balance between risk and rescue, it is not the political fallout you're talking about, but the mortal danger or the danger of being jailed to the people who are carrying out the mission.
Not only jailed, losing their lives. And I remember making a presentation to the Prime Minister. It was Sharon. And in all of these kinds of presentations, what you always had to do is to describe the operation and then to point out one or two weak links where you assume that this could be a weak link. And I pointed out a weak link. And it was a serious weak link. And I said, this is a weak link. And everybody stopped. And the stenographist stopped. And I remember it was summer, so the wind in the room was whining. You could hear the whining of the machines. And then Prime Minister said to me, tell me, what do I say if this happens? What do I say? And I said, Mr. Prime Minister, it's very simple. You will say that you knew nothing about this, but the person who knew everything is the head of the Mossad, and he takes the line. So he thought a minute. He said, okay, I approve the operation, but not for the reason that the head of Mossad put forward. He was not talking to me. He was talking to the protocol.
So this is the old John F. Kennedy versus Allen Dulles regarding the Bay of Pigs,
Yes.
where Dulles took the fall.
Yes, yes. So you have to realize that there are moments in history in which the head of Mossad is a fall guy, yes. And it sometimes causes bitterness, and it sometimes is very difficult. And sometimes you have to do things without consulting the Prime Minister, not to countermand things, but a real Mossad chief takes risks, certain risks, on his own conscience.
To allow him deniability.
To allow not only deniability, but to make sure that the operation goes forward. Because what we have to weigh are three things: the threat to the people, the danger of the operation, and what is known, the value of what you are going to do. To assess the value as against the danger, as against the ultimate personal relationship you have with the Prime Minister and so forth. And sometimes you don't go to the Prime Minister and present him a problem like the kind I presented to him, because you know in advance that you cannot actually place him in such a predicament.
But the other coin is a point you made during your time as Mossad chief and later in public, and that is the obligation of Mossad and country to those people who served you and ended up in custody somewhere, whether in friendly countries where they operated or obviously in enemy country.
Sure. When I came to office, we had a man in jail. He was in a Swiss jail. There had been an operation there, technical operation. The operation went foul, and the commander of the operation was apprehended, and he was in the Swiss prison. And first of all, we tried to get him out on jail, and jail was refused. And we had to bring in the Attorney General. And after a lot of discussion with the chief prosecutor of the Swiss Federation, who was a very tough lady, she agreed to release him on condition that the Attorney General of Israel would give her a written commitment that he would see to it that the man went back and stood trial for what he did. And the Attorney General, who was a friend of mine, Eliakim Rubinstein, who later became Deputy President of the Israeli Supreme Court, said, I'm sending in a person into the jail, my personal representative, in which the man will commit himself to me. And I objected. I was only 2 or 3 weeks in office. And I said, I don't agree. I am responsible. I will give you the commitment. He said, no. I said, don't you understand? You're suddenly taking a person who I've sent on service and you're turning him into an ordinary citizen. He said, well, okay, I won't do it. And I gave in. And the man came back. And the time came for him to stand trial. And the question was...
For something which is not an offense under Israeli law, only under Swiss law.
Under Swiss law. And I said, you should go back. And this became known to other people. And 2 veterans of the operational division went public and sent a letter to the Israeli Prime Minister saying, the head of Mossad, Efraim Halevy, is sending a person who went out to serve for the Mossad. He's sending him visibly and openly into danger of being sentenced to jail in the country. This is unheard of. And the division in which this man served became very restless. I had to spend a whole day talking to them, and I won't go into the details. But I had to, knowing that this might happen, and knowing that this would become public, possibly, and so on and so forth, I knew that I had to do everything I could, and only myself could do it, to make sure that ultimately, when the judge issued the judgment, the man would go to jail.
Fascinating stories and lessons by the man who emerged from the shadows, Efraim Halevy, former chief of Mossad, former head of the Israeli National Security Council, and ambassador to NATO and the European Union. Efraim Halevy, thank you so much.
Thank you.